Welcome, W.A.S.P Nation. I bid you welcome. The W.A.S.P US tour last year was a huge success with many sold out shows, and now W.A.S.P is preparing for their European tour that begins on March 17th in Manchester, England. The European tour runs through May 18th, ending in Bulgaria. Get your tickets now for the European tour at waspnation.com. Also available for the European tour are meet and greet VIP tickets. Take it from me, this is a great opportunity to get to meet Blackie in person, get a photo with him, get a couple of autographs, and take part in an intimate Q&A session with Blackie Lawless himself. You can also purchase your meet and greet tickets at waspnation.com. And last, don't forget, you can also purchase official W.A.S.P tour merchandise and exclusive classic design t-shirts at waspnation.com. Welcome. I bid you welcome to my music corner of the world. I am Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad, John Clauser, whatever you wish to call me. My fellow headless child, my fellow hellion, my fellow wild one of all ages, my fellow manimal, my fellow mean man, my fellow, gosh, what else can I come up with? Restless gypsy. I could come up with 100 bunch of things here. John, the music nut, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, John. I'm your fellow Dr. Rocker, too.
There you go.
How are
I love
you?
it. I love it. You do enough of this stuff and you can, I don't even know what he says after that. But anyway,
There you go.
as you can probably imagine by the Dr. Rocker mention, we have this is a tough. This is the one I've been the most nervous about. The Crimson Idol. Today we get Crimson. Long live the King of Mercy.
That's right.
Oh my. June of 1992 is when this gets released. And I seem to recall it took me a little while to get a hold of this thing because it wasn't readily available in the American markets. I think I got mine through import markets, import catalogs I was working with. But you know, so yeah, because I think the deal they had with Capitol was kind of shaky, so it was on the Parlophone label. So there was a little gap. I think eventually Capitol does release it. It just took them a little while.
Right.
Um, I was I'm gonna go over the stats of the album and the singles. This won't take me long because there's not a lot to report on here. The Austrian charts goes to number 30. The German charts makes it to 35. My buddy Paul over in Norway got up to 11. Swedish charts number 31. Swiss charts number 24. UK it gets to 21. Finland, what happened to you? Why didn't it chart for
Yeah.
you guys? Come on now. You guys were so good up until this point.
Yeah. You're
Um,
kidding.
However, the Finnish charts, it does. Chainsaw Charlie the first single, and it actually went to number 3 on the Finnish charts. How about
Ooh.
that? Goes to 17 on the UK charts. The Idol would come out, and that would go up to 41 on the UK charts. And I Am One would go to 56th. Hold On to My Heart would also be a single, but unfortunately does not chart. Now, what country am I missing from the album charts?
Australia?
Well, that too. So Peter Kerr, y'all failed us in Australia.
Oh, you're forgetting us.
The good old US of A. What happened, US of A? Why did this not? Well, let's think about it. 1992 was also the year of Pantera. It was also the year of grunge was still happening pretty big yet,
Huge.
but Pantera pretty much takes over the realm of music of metal at that point. So maybe the label thing just wasn't because it didn't get the distribution. Obviously, it wasn't in stores, so it just didn't get the chance for people to get this. So there is so much. that I'm going to dive into here. But John, I am going to let you run with this first, and then I will go into my whole little spiel here. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, yeah, I didn't get this when it first came out because, as John indicated, this was hard to find. This was their last album on Capitol, but because it was their last album, they didn't give this much of a push at all. And furthermore, honestly, I was listening to other music at this point. I jumped into grunge at this point. Um, and it was 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, 3 years was a long time between studio albums. Now you had 3 years between Inside the Electric Circus and Headless Children, but you did have a live album in there with a couple with 3 new songs on it to hold you over until then. But here it was 3 years, and back then 2 years was usually the norm at this point. 3 years was a little long, and which was interesting because Headless Children had done well in the States. I mean, we still don't know if it's certified gold, but it did well. Their videos did get some airplay, and it did well outside the United States, as John indicated last week. But this was originally going to be a Blackie Lawless solo album, and after some after fans said it should be a W.A.S.P album, and it does sound like a W.A.S.P album most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
He said, okay, we're going to put it out under the W.A.S.P name. At this point, no Chris Holmes, no Johnny Rod on this album either. Blackie plays the rhythm guitar, all lead vocals, all bass, all keyboards, and on lead guitar, you have Bob Kulick. Bob Kulick has been on a lot of different albums for a variety of artists. He passed away during COVID, I believe, so rest in peace, Bob. He played on Alive 2. He played on the studio tracks on Alive. He played on 4 to 5 studio tracks on Alive 2. The only one he didn't play on was Rocket Ride, which was Ace Frehley's song.
Understandable.
Right. He, I believe did he play with Alice Cooper at one point too? I'm not sure.
I don't know about Alice Cooper. I know he was with Meatloaf's band for a little while,
Okay.
and I know, and of course, he was on Paul Stanley's solo album.
Yes, he was on Paul Stanley's solo album because he was about, from what I understand, and I believe this was from reading Paul Stanley's autobiography, he was about to get the Kiss gig.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ace Frehley walked in with one red sneaker, one orange sneaker, and he did his thing, and he wound up winning the gig.
Yeah.
You also may know Bob's brother Bruce, who would later be in Kiss, and he played on a succession of albums from Asylum right through Carnival of Souls. He played on Alive 3, heck of a
Mm-hmm.
talent. And to this day, he's been playing with Grand Funk Railroad for a long time now. He's been
Mm-hmm.
their lead guitar player. Anyway, and the drummer, Frankie Banali's back. And Frankie Banali, as much of a monster he was on the Headless Children, he's even more so on the Crimson Idol.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we have here is a wonderful concept album where Blackie writes a story which a lot of people think is based on his own life. At least I heard that when it first came out, about Jonathan Steele. And Jonathan Steele had parents who were religious, and Jonathan had an older brother named Michael. And Michael was the favorites, even though Michael and Jonathan really loved each other. And Michael died when he was hit by a drunk driver,
Mm-hmm.
and is hurt the Steele family greatly. And after that, Jonathan, who was still with us, he felt the brunts of what happened to Michael. And he became a rock star. And this goes on the path of his life. This is very well played, well executed, very well produced. Blackie produced this one.
Mm-hmm.
The sound on it is fantastic. Sonically, it's maybe even better than Headless Children. Musically, on that same level, if not more so. There are some parallels on this album with the Who's Tommy, in my opinion. It plays out a lot like a heavy metal Tommy,
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of acoustic guitars, just more orchestration on Tommy, but but here it's more the keyboards. And by this point, with modern technology, you were able to get more sounds out of the keyboards than you could back in 1969. Um, very heavy on the drums, very heavy on the drama. There's a lot of songs on here that they play it straight, they're heavy all the way through, and then there's a lot that have this slow burn, a lot of acoustic music with Blackie singing, and then it just builds and builds until it gets into its main theme. Now, as far as the tracks go, the Titanic Overture is the opening track, and very short on the vocal, but it brings you into the main theme. Like I mentioned, it starts out acoustic, Blackie singing, very solemn, and then it goes into its main riff. The keyboards here add to the proceedings. They don't dominate. They play as like a separate instrument. It's they work very well on here. And it goes into Invisible Boy. Invisible Boy, if I remember correctly, they had a video for this. I think I saw it on Headbangers Ball once. If I'm wrong, please say in the
Possible.
comments. If I'm wrong, please tell me in the comments. But I could have swore I saw a video for this. This song is an excellent track. It talks about what Jonathan was going through, the abuse he was going through from his parents, based on what I just discussed before. How he was the boy unwanted, he was the black sheep. This is very good musically. Great solos here from Bob. Strong track. Goes into Arena of Pleasure, where Jonathan finds his home on the stage. This is more of a driving track in the traditional Wasp canon at this point. Bob has a great solo here at the end. Frankie is fantastic on this track as well. And then goes into Chainsaw Charlie, Murders in a Rue Morgue. This one starts out very solemn, with acoustic. And it gets quiet, and then you hear the chainsaw, and then it goes into that. It goes into that galloping rhythm, and it just takes you on a ride for the rest of the track. This is a song that W.A.S.P do to this day. It is one of their most exciting songs. It's Chainsaw Charlie is Alex Rodman, who was Jonathan Steele's manager. And he was a bloodless manager. And he goes into that relationship during this song. The song goes into a second theme. As it goes just like the heretic, the lost child does on Headless Children. And that's when Blackie takes on the voice of Alex and talks about how he's a cutthroat manager and a lot of other words I cannot say. But it works within the lyrics, work well within the song. This song will take you on a ride. It's a fantastic track live. Whether you hear it later on in this album or you go to see them live like John and I did last year. Fantastic track. Then they slow down a little bit for The Gypsy Meets the Boy. Now, this one is starts out acoustic, and It's got that slow burn. It eventually does get heavier. And I believe on this track, no, they actually go back into the Titanic Overture musically. And as this album goes on, they will revisit parts of other songs to put it all together, which is great. Dr. Rocker, that's kind of like Arena of Pleasure, and the fact it's just a very heavy track. Blackie sings the heck out of it. Blackie's vocals, just like on Headless Children, they are spectacular throughout. This is a very strong track. I Am One brings back that drama and heaviness that you had on Chainsaw Charlie. Another wonderful track. Frankie shines like the sun on here. Very heavy. This is him. I Am One relates to what Michael said about Jonathan. Even though Michael and Jonathan were polar opposites, Michael had always told Jonathan to always believe in himself because you were the chosen one. God shined upon you and gave you something, and you should take advantage of that and use it. Use that gift that you were given. That's where this song goes, like lyrically, musically, outstanding, fantastic track. The Idol is mellower, and this one has a long solo by Bob to take it out, but this and the next track are more reflective. Blackie sings very well on here again. The Idol is another song that they do live, and it works spectacularly on this last tour. Now, we're going to get into Blackie's voice now. Blackie is one of the best singers in this genre, bar none. And if anyone doubts you, have them listen to Hold On to My Heart. Because this song will, I'm tearing up just talking about this song. I mean, it's just a beautiful ballad. This one, it doesn't really go into, it's not a slow burn, it gets heavy or anything. It stays mellow the whole time. The keyboards work very well, adding just the right amount of color to this song. His vocal on here is beautiful. It's a wonderful song. And the last track is Great Misconceptions of Me. And this puts it all together. It just ties everything together. It's a long song, but it's very exciting because it brings back a lot of themes from other songs on the album, and it just puts it all back in. It all just, like I said, ties it all together. It is a fantastic closer. Now, when I bought this album, and I knew the album, I heard the album, excuse me, I would later buy the album from eMusic, where you buy it from their site and the artists get paid. And then later on, I did buy this double CD from Icarus Records, and we'll talk about the songs on the second disc as well. On here, you have The Story of Jonathan, the prologue to the Crimson Idol. This is a 16-minute spoken word piece done by Blackie and his acoustic guitar, and there's some sounds brought in and out to try to add to the story. Blackie tells the story of Jonathan Steele here. First thing you think is, in addition to music, he could be reading books and making money doing this, because his voice just takes you right into the story. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a W.A.S.P fan. I'm just saying that if you're listen to books on tape or books on disc or whatever, he has a great deep storytelling voice. Listening to this, you get the concept of the album and you hear the whole story. It works spectacularly well. 16 minutes doesn't feel, again, it feels much shorter, because he's taking you in with his voice and what he's saying about the story. That's disc one. Disc two, we get two tracks that did not make the album, but could have. Phantoms in the Mirror, that has more of a driving feel. It reminds me of like the Heretic Part Two to me.
I
It
can see
has,
that.
yeah, it has that same rhythm as the Heretic does. It would have fit in on this album. The problem is, what do you take out? You can't take anything out because it's so perfectly executed the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
and the way the songs are set up on the album. It's you don't really need to touch it. So this is a great bonus track. And the eulogy starts out very piano led. It reminds you a little of Thunderhead, but it doesn't have that same drama when it gets heavy. Although it
Mm-hmm.
does get heavy, the guitar kicks in maybe halfway through. It's a much shorter song. It's about 4 minutes. It's a very strong track too. And then you get the live tracks. And the first two are actually, well, actually, before you get their cover of Led Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks, which was originally on Led Zeppelin 4. It was the last song on the album. It's a pretty good version.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it's not the original, but it's a very good version. They
I
do a
think
good
Frankie.
job.
I think if Frankie was the one who played drums on it, he certainly did a he did a good job with it. So
I agree. You certainly did. The next two tracks, we get acoustic live versions of The Idol and Hold On to My Heart, which work very, very well.
mm-hmm.
This is Blackie raw and singing here, and there's no studio effects or anything. This is his voice, and
Mm-hmm.
they're wonderful. And then we get the rest of the album is live tracks from Donington Park in Leicestershire, England. And these are raw, these are rocking. They slay. They
Mm-hmm.
slay. They're not perfect. They're not perfect tracks
Mm-hmm.
vocally, but musically, kills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You got Wild Child, you get Chainsaw Charlie, which, as John has educated me before we started taping, Johnny Rod is sharing the lead vocal with Blackie on the pre-choruses on this. You get I Want to Be Somebody, and you get The Invisible Boy, and you get The Real Me, their cover from the Who that the Who originally put on Quadrophenia, and W.A.S.P put on the Headless Children, and then you get the Great Misconceptions of Me as well. So an already excellent album, and then they added the second disc, and this was in 1998 when they put it out as a two disc, and it's not just one or two tracks or anything. They give you a wealth of wonderful material here.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Idol. So how would I rank this? 10. One of my favorite concept albums.
Yep.
And Blackie on the cross here, what would be Jonathan?
That would be my yeah. I would think it would be yeah. My guess is that's the it's the Jonathan character, but yeah, yeah.
Yep,
That would be man.
that'd be it.
That would
That's
be it.
10 star 10 out of 10 for me. Wonderful album. I mean, it picks up where the Headless Children left off.
Mm-hmm.
It's more dramatic. The musicianship, top notch. You got Blackie in here for Ken Hensley on the keyboards, but it's not missing anything on a keyboard. Oh, it is a different sound keyboard wise. But you got Blackie handling most of the work. You got Frankie Banali in a fantastic drum performance as well. You got Bob Kulick doing
Yeah.
some great lead work throughout this album.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe at another time, maybe if they put this out in 1990, maybe if Capitol had given them more of a push, because Headless Children was did sell. I mean, it certainly wasn't a disappointment as a sales wise,
No.
but wasn't a bomb, But maybe in another time, maybe a couple years earlier, this would have kept that momentum going, at least the musical momentum, I think,
Right.
because I still think Headless Children was a musical leap forward, and this built on that. But
Absolutely.
those of us who know it love it. You know, don't judge it by its subpar sales. This is a fantastic album.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Here we
Okay.
go.
So here we go. So yes, as I mentioned before, this was a hard one for me to come by when I knew it was coming out. So thankfully I was getting a an import catalog, and that's how I would get it. Um okay, so I'm going to first look at the characters that are mentioned here. Of course, you have Jonathan Steele, the main character, the Crimson Idol, as it were. You have William Steele, Big Red, the father. You have Elizabeth Steele, the not so educated religious mother, as he would say, but pretty, very pretty.
Very pretty.
You have to. That's important. Michael Steele, Little Red, the big brother who just who adored Jonathan. You know, you have the Mirror. That was an integral character in this story. You have Chainsaw Charlie, the president of showbiz, the main guy, and his wielding of the chainsaw. That was the record company, and how he, in the morgue, that was where the music came to die, as it were. He brings in Alex Rodman to be the manager. And interesting play on words, I think, with the name here, because when you think about who managed W.A.S.P at the time, was the guys of Sanctuary Music, which was, of course, Rod Smallwood, but Andy Taylor. For some reason, I thought his name was Alex Taylor, but Andy Taylor. So either way, good little play on words there. You have the Gypsy, who reads his fortune and then walks away basically horrified at what's coming up for him. With the Dr. Rocker comes in, and boom, Uncle Slam comes in, and well, that takes over there too. And then you finally end off with the King of Mercy. You have these main characters kind of all dispersed out throughout the movie. Oh, and let's not forget about Tanya. We can't forget about Tanya, you know, friend of this one girl. So, if you know, you know. The Arena of Pleasure would be another significant place. That's where he goes, and he that's where he envelops himself in that music. So, what do I feel is the general theme of this album? And this is what I came up with. If you think differently in the comics comments, please tell me so. But to me, the general theme of this is acceptance. So one thing that Jonathan wanted the most, because he was never accepted even as a child, and he longed for that. And Jonathan went to all kinds of lengths to get that acceptance, only to find out how shallow it can truly be when it's not from the people you need it from the most. To me, that's what this album says, and how it speaks to me personally. My personal connection to this album, while I can't say that me and the Jonathan character are alike, I feel at times we had the same kind of dreams. My parents loved me. They accepted me. And I would certainly see that as I got older. I had a very supportive brother and sister. I didn't lose a relative to drunk driving, but the biggest loss that I had as a high school kid, going as I got older, was the high school sweetheart I dated, and then we would break up. But then she had a blood disease called aplastic anemia, which unfortunately would take her life about 2 years after we broke up. That was probably one of the deepest losses I suffered as in my teenage years into my 20s. Probably at least at that point in my life. There'll be more going later. Um, but I was the songwriter. I was writing lyrics in school. I've already mentioned a song I wrote called Sadist, which basically rips off W.A.S.P in so many different directions. It's not even funny. Well, it is funny. It's awful, but anyway, I wrote lyrics a lot, but I didn't really write a lot of music to it. But I still had those dreams of like, man, what if these songs could kick the world on its rear end and just knock its head straight off? What if my songs could do that? Well, I think I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't really ready for that. And I just got into the 9 to 5 work world, although my job was more like a 6 to 3, but I still did that as Jonathan would mention about his parents, live, work, die. That's kind of that was kind of the mantra I kind of took on a little bit, I guess you could say. So I lived what I could and did what I could, but I let my own music dreams die. And I always wonder what my life would have been like if I had pursued those dreams and actually did become famous. How would I have handled fame? In the story, Jonathan says he handles fame quite well, but at some point those cracks start showing.
Yes.
Especially when he gets to the phone call. Um, how would I have handled the lures of fame? Would I have gotten addicted to drugs? Would it have been alcohol? Would it have been sex? How would I have been screwed over by somebody like a Chainsaw Charlie? I always like to think that the music business was about as cutthroat as a professional wrestling business. For all of us wrestling fans, if you dig into the promotions and stuff, yeah, those promotions could be pretty crooked sometimes. So those wrestlers would go out there and practically kill themselves and not get much of anything for it. But thankfully I did realize that my songs would probably be laughed off the stage, and I probably would never have made it any big. But what if my songs were better? What if I started writing more stuff that like a lot of people like a song I wrote called Scars Too Deep to Heal, which really, when you listen to this story, I think I may have drawn that title from some of this stuff, because he mentions some wounds never heal. That's mentioned toward the end of the story. What if I had gone in that direction? I have so many what ifs when it comes to this. What if they were received well and fame embraced me? Would I have been left as empty as Jonathan as he would wind up? I've heard Blackie tell a story of after Michael Jackson died, he took a ride out to Neverland, and he just saw how empty and shallow it was. And he thought about Michael Jackson. He just sat there and he just stared at it for a while. And he realized, some people just aren't made for fame, that at least not that kind of fame. That kind of excessive fame where just everybody wants you. That's not for everybody. That's a hard life to live. I can't even imagine what that could be like. But I just don't think some of us are made for that. What about the mirror? I remember as a teenager what I would do with the mirror. I would get a guitar, like I would be playing air guitar, and the mirror was like the audience. And I would be jamming out to songs, and the mirror was my audience. And that's how I looked at the mirror. And the mirror told me I was a big star, and I'm like, yeah, so I believed my own hype as a teenager kind of thing. I look at the music business now and think, how much of that is still true? What is the Chainsaw Charlie in the morgue of 2023? Is it like Spotify, Apple Music, uh, Amazon Music, whatever the streaming services is that you have to play, you have to get about 300 million plays before you make $3. I know that's an exaggeration, but I mean, not too far really. Maybe
Right.
300,000 you might make $3, but I mean, the labels need the bands to go out there to do their thing. The bands don't need labels really because they can just put music out and do whatever they want now. They don't need a record label. The record labels can't even do the promotions well anymore unless you're able to sell 20 million copies, which in these days, who's doing that? Nobody's selling that many physical copies. It's all streaming anymore. Um, so my feeling is I think maybe Spotify and those kind of likes, maybe that's the new Chainsaw Charlie. Maybe that's the new Morgue. I don't know. Just kind of my thoughts. Um, I don't really think there's much I can really add to talking about all the songs. Um, you mentioned who is on this thing. There is actually a couple of uncredited artists who appear on the album, like Stat Howland
Yes.
is featured on drums at certain parts. Doug Aldrich actually has a uncredited solo on Arena of Pleasure.
Yes.
So you have that um, as they did the tour, which we'll probably get into the tour a little bit. Um, you had Doug Blair, who has been with the band now for better part of 15 plus years or more. Um, he was a friend of Stat Howland. They played in a band together in the Connecticut area. So they already had history. So you had that. Blackie brings Johnny Rod in for bass and backing vocals. And of course, Stat's on drums. Um, and this bootleg that I picked up at a record show recently, this is the back of it. Live at the Cambridge Corn Exchange, Cambridge, UK, in October of 1992. So, and this has a good chunk of have a chunk Crimson Idol songs. I think about six. The Titanic Overture, like you get like with most musicals, you get this overture that combines all these different themes and then makes it into one song, and you get this brilliant song. Great opening track. You have of course, the Invisible Boy, which just kicks off, and it's just 16 going nowhere. There's just so many strong lines in this whole thing. Arena of Pleasure, another driving track, like you mentioned. Yeah, and of course, all these songs had these little interlude things, kind of in each song, which adds to the mood and kind of sets up the next scene, as it were.
Right.
Chainsaw Charlie, of course, we get introduced that the president of showbiz. And again, I'm not going to go into the lyrics that Blackie uses on that. Maybe if we talk about Reidolized, then maybe I'll talk about the way he cleaned up that version a little bit. But anyway, you get the idea of just how nasty the music business can be, and how nasty record executives can be. The Gypsy and the Boy, I mentioned during the Headless Children, we would come back to a song from there. If you remember from the B-sides, there was a song called For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Right.
The Gypsy and the Boy is essentially a reworking of For Whom the Bell Tolls. Just a much lighter acoustic sound. Does it eventually get heavy? You bring in those other themes that's prevalent throughout the rest of the album. But yes, the Gypsy, the Gypsy Queen, the Crimson Idol. You see all these, you hear all those lines from For Whom the Bell Tolls, and I think the song, it becomes realized a lot better and a lot stronger. I love For Whom the Bell Tolls, don't get me wrong, but this one works even stronger in my opinion. Then we get to Dr. Rocker, help me please, Dr. Rocker, I need. Doctor, please, my MD, fix me in my time of need, because can you see the fire in my eyes? He's so Dr. Rocker becomes his new best friend, and then we go into I Am One, and you hear from what is mentioned in the story about one of the Easy Rider parties. So you get this wild party. You hear the,
Mm-hmm.
oh baby, this stuff is great. You get that. You get, Jonathan, I want you to meet a friend of mine, Tanya, and then of course here comes Alex. So what the bloody's going on around here? And so you get that little spiel, and you know, off. Well, no, I take that back. I jumped ahead of myself. I Am One. You get the hello, New York City, hello, Dallas, Texas, London, England. How the heck are you? That. So I got ahead of myself. I'm so excited. I got to, yeah. I Am One, though, great track. Then you get into the Idol where you get all the different stuff going on, and then you get
Right.
the you get that phone call, hello, and then you get that solemn beginning, and it just builds, and then you have this beautiful. You have the intro to the intro, and then that main intro comes in, and it's just like it just melts your heart because Blackie's just singing in this desperate voice with the verse, and it leads into the chorus, and you get this amazing solo work from Bob Kulick, which God bless Doug Blair, because he did a fantastic job trying to replicate it as best he could.
Mm-hmm.
And the Idol becomes a very epic track, very wonderful track. Hold on to my heart. My God, if this song does not melt one's heart, I don't know what would. Beautiful track. Blackie's voice just absolutely shines. Just an enormous, beautiful, tasty solo by Bob. Just I like you. I think I cried the first time I heard that song. It was so
Yeah.
wonderful. Just a great track. Great misconceptions of me. It's showtime. And then here you go. You get the great finales finally here. I thank you for coming into my theater of fear. Hearing this song and watching this song live sent chills. If the Idol didn't do it enough, this one definitely amplified those chills down my spine. They pulled this off so well. There's so many dynamics in this song. The lead work is great. These themes, these guitar themes that would keep popping up, the solo, everything about the Freebird ending, as I like to call it,
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
fantastic storytelling as it comes to the end. With these six strings, I make a noose. To take my life, it's time to choose. What the newspapers say, what the headline says, suicide, my suicide, just brings it all to the end. The bonus tracks, Phantoms of the Mirror. Again, where exactly do you put this in this? If you were gonna, and I try to figure out where to put this in the playlist. I think I do it after Invisible Boy. Um, I don't know why, but that's where I put it. I almost hated putting the eulogy after Great Misconceptions of Me because that is a perfect ending. You don't need the eulogy.
Right.
It's still a great track. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. It's still a great little track, but it's not needed really if you're going to play the whole thing as a playlist. So that's just my feeling. Um, the acoustic versions of the Idol and Hold On to My Heart. If you thought the studio version of Hold On to My Heart was beautiful, this acoustic version is even better and even more just tender. Again,
Yes.
Blackie's voice so tender here. Um, all the live tracks you've already mentioned, all those. I won't go into those. Um, but when was listening to I was listening to this bootleg, which I've only gotten about an album through one of the two albums. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet. Um, it may not be the best recorded versions. It's maybe not our bootleg quality, I guess, but still, it's pretty good for hearing. I think some of the tracks actually, maybe if they'd been cleaned up better, probably would have almost sounded better as on the bonus disc, maybe, but that's just me. Um, Blackie calls this his favorite of all the albums, hands down. it's my favorite. There's no doubt about this one.
Me
Um,
too.
I will, but I have a lot of love for all the stuff that's coming, that's to come. But nothing tops Crimson Isle in my opinion, because it just resonated so deeply in my soul. Knowing that could have been me. That could have been me with the fame, or with the parties and the women and everything. That could have been me at one time, and maybe I should be thankful that I didn't get that dream. I don't know, but I I just it just resonated so deep. So again, if all that you listen to have listened to with Wasp, if you just think it's about I want to be somebody, an animal and wild child and sex drive, please get that out of your mind, because it's so much deeper and
Right.
so much stronger than that. When Blackie started doing more stuff like this, it just totally changed the game. So, absolutely wonderful album. I wish I could have gotten to see this tour. John, I don't know if you looked at the tour specs on this one.
I did.
Take it away.
Well, they did only a handful of dates like they did with Headless Children. And a lot of the shows again were in Europe. When they played here, they played Newport Music Hall in Columbus, Ohio, to Troubadour in West Hollywood, California, the Avalon, Chicago, Illinois. There was a different Ritz that they played in Roseville, Michigan, if I'm saying it correctly, and the Mirage in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Toad's Place in New Haven, Connecticut. But there were a few shows in Japan. But other than that, it was a lot of shows in England, Germany, a few in Spain. I'm sorry, a few in Spain, France, and Netherlands. I'm saying Spain and France at the same time there. Spain, France, Netherlands, Switzerland. They did a show. And as far as the tour, that tour, they did 6 songs from this album: Invisible Boy, Chainsaw Charlie, Dr. Rocker, I Am One, The Idol, and The Great Misconceptions of Me. Now, it would be 15 years later, in 2007, when they play the whole album in its entirety on a tour. And the first time they did that was in Greece. And I don't believe they played any shows in the States. I know they didn't do a
I don't
tour in
think
the
so.
States because they didn't do a big tour in the States for 20 years until last year. So, but that was how the tour went. And one thing I want to say about the Crimson Idol in regards to them as a band now, in my humble opinion, if it wasn't for the Crimson Idol, I don't think they would have done this tour and sold out nearly every place they played here in the States. They played a lot of 2,000-seat venues and they sold them out, some of them months in advance. I think Headless Children and Crimson Idol and the reputation that gained over the decades is what brought the people back out for this tour, which is why fans were reaching out to the promoters and saying, we want to see W.A.S.P, when a lot of promoters were saying, oh no, they're not a draw in the United States.
Mhm.
This album and the Headless Children before it, but particularly the Crimson Idol. This is what really solidified W.A.S.P, and this is what built their reputation. And now a good they're a good touring act in the United States again. They are a strong touring act. They put on a great show. They could come back out. I mean, they're going to be doing Europe this year. They're probably doing it as we speak. If they were to come back out later on this year in the fall, they could do what they did just this last year. I mean, they still do a lot of stuff from the Crimson Idol live because it's held up so well. They can continue right on that path, and also bring in the early fan favorites like Wild Child and I Want to Be Somebody. But this is what really solidified their career, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, yes, it was 40 years of the band last year, but it was also 30 years of Crimson Idol.
That's true
So
too.
that was the big reason for, if this was one of the
There you
one of
go.
the one of the shirts that you can buy at waspnation.com. So I'm going to get that extra plug in there
With the red blood six string.
with the red
Blood
blood
red,
six string. But yeah,
blood red
so
six string.
it's 30 years of Idol. So of course they were going to do at least three tracks. So
Mm,
from on that last tour, but yeah, that was the thing about this tour, that tour in 90 and 92. Setlist.com listed I think it was 54 shows total.
right.
14 of them in the US only. That's it. 17 shows in the UK, and then the rest, as you mentioned, just interspersed between Japan and Spain, and areas where it apparently did well. And because
Yes.
he just didn't take on a huge world tour with this album. And yeah, as we'll learn with the next album, uh, he doesn't even, I don't think he even toured that one. So
Right.
but we're not going to get ahead of ourselves too quickly here. But yeah, this would have been an opportunity to have, if they could have capitalized on it, and if they had if they got that push. I think Maiden was kind of falling off the wheels a little bit. So, you
They
know,
were.
you couldn't really get a good tour with them again. If you could have put them together, I don't think that would have done well, because people weren't doing No Prayer for the Dying and Fear of the Dark quite as much. So, and then Bruce left. So, which I think by what, 90, it was 93, 94, I think, when he would leave. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it just, the opportunities that they could have had if they just had the right push and the right promotion. I don't know if, I think Rod and Sanctuary Productions, I think they did a good job getting them going, but somewhere they just realized, no, we're just going to focus on Maiden, and you guys are just going to fall off by the wayside.
Right.
I don't think they're still even managed by them anymore. I think they dropped them a long time ago. But anyway, y'all can tell me about that in the comments and things. But um, okay, so with that, what any last parting thoughts on the Crimson Isle before we wrap this up?
Well, all I can say is this is a fantastic album. This built on the more serious musical and lyrical end of Wasp.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 10 out of 10 for me. It's a wonderful album. I mean, again, just like Headless Children, if you think they're just singing about sex, you know, singing about themes that aren't very mature, check out Headless Children, check out The Crimson Idol. They're fantastic albums.
Yep.
And this was one of the best concept albums in my lifetime.
Right. Yeah, it certainly is one of my favorite concepts. Certainly ranks right up there with like The Wall and Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and Mindcrime for me. It's probably probably the one I listen to the most. So I would probably rank it above all of those. But if for those watching this, if you're 16 going nowhere, okay, look look for that support. It's there. Don't
Absolutely.
don't go running into things that will only put a little band-aid over a tourniquet. There's hope out there. You can find it. Be careful what you wish for. It might come true. And my last parting words for this: long live the King of Mercy. With that said, my co-captain, John the Music Nut, I am Johnny Metal, John Clauser the Metal Dad. This is my music corner of the world. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of the Crimson Idol. What are some of our thoughts a little off the deep end? That's what's up for you. But let us know what you think. Next week we go a little more black. Till next week, long live the King of Mercy.